The shed was on the mound in the middle of the farm. From there they could see most parts of the farm. Ado arranged the 3 logs that were already in the fireplace. He stuffed the spaces with broken twigs and dry palm fronds and struck the match. The tiny tongue of blue flame licked the dry pieces and caught the twigs, which in turn gradually ate into the dry logs. The smoke snaked into the air, made its way over the rice and maize, circled around in the air currents, and then continued its upward course. Ado followed the smoke with his eyes until it disappeared in a splash of tiny threads and dissolved it into the nearby forest. Ado admired his father and Mahama for the good job they had done, except for about an acre of maize still standing in weeds. The rest of the farm was clean. He was still inhaling his fill of the breeze that swept across the farm when his father called him. Ado! Ado turned to see the 2 men already working hard. He picked up his hoe and walked towards them. He bent close to his father and began to clear the weeds among the tender crops. Nemo allowed the boy to work for some time and then began. When you get to the farm, and Ado could almost tell what would follow. Your first business, if everything is all right, is to tackle what you came to do before the sun hits the soil and your back begins to ache. You don't stand gazing into the sky. He paused, still hoeing. Ado could almost touch the hardness of the words. Work, my boy. It was his father's word. Work never kills a man, but a lazy man will die of poverty. Nemo held a stump in his left hand and cut it with a hoe. True, Mahama responded, hoeing close to his master. Did you ever hear of a man who died from doing too much work? Nemo asked, not expecting an answer, but Mahama responded, never. Nemo remained silent for some time and then repeated Mahama's word. Never? Never, my boy, he emphasized. But ask me if I know of a man who ended up in jails because of he would never do any work with his hands. Ask me, and I can tell you how many such people I know. Adu knew when his father was serious, but what his father had said tickled his ears. If it had been an ordinary conversation, he would have wanted to know who had been jailed for stealing. Where did this incident take place? What did he steal? Was he arrested by policemen? Even when our mothers used to tell us stories in the evenings, Nemo resumed his discourse. They told us the troubles of the lazy spider. All the time it was the lazy person who suffered, never the hard-working fellow. Adu's mind shot to the story his mother had told him and his little sister Ya. Just the other night, his father was right. Of all the stories he had heard and those they read in their school books, none ridiculed a hardworking man. No, no, Adu remembered. There was one, the story about the spider, and the tree squirrel was different. The tree squirrel was the hardworking one. He cultivated his own farm and worked hard on it. As for Spider, he roamed around doing nothing the whole season. But when the time for harvesting came, he hatched a dubious plan to confiscate Tree Squirrel's groundnuts farm. He made a path of the farm. What are you doing out there? Tree Squirrel asked Spider. Why are you making a pathway into my farm? Your farm? Spider retorted. What are you talking about? The matter reached the elders. According to his mother, and they called Spider and Squirrel to defend their case. Elders, Tree Squirrel began. Throughout the whole season, I had toiled on this land and managed to cultivate some groundnuts. All the time Spider was playing and drinking with those fellows in the marketplace. When when the time of harvesting came, I went to my farm one day and there was Spider trying to make his pathway through my farm. All right, the elder said. Tell us your story, Spider. Spider rose up, bowed humbly to the elders and addressed them. I know you are all wise people, my fathers. I do not have a long story to tell. There is only one question I want to put to my friend Squirrel here, and it is this. Since the world began, where has it ever been heard that a man made a farm without a path that leads to it? Spider sat down at once, an act that increased the weight of his question. The elders began to consult one another. Meanwhile, Squirrel rose to his feet and said, Everybody knows that I don't dwell on the soil. My home is in the trees. I make my journeys on ropes and branches. I don't need any path to my farm. The elders, full of wisdom, will judge that, Spider said. The decision of the elders amused Adu. The farm was confiscated from Squirrel, the hard worker, and given to Spider, the lazy one. But his father was still talking. Whenever you come across a situation where it looks as if a hardworking person has been ridiculed or cheated out of his possessions, look at that situation more carefully. Adu felt his father was reading was reading his mind. In that situation, Nemo continued, something dreadful will soon happen to the cheat to reveal the truth. That struck a chord in Adu's mind. He tried to recall. Did his mother say something bad had happened to Spider in that story? True. His father cut short his thoughts. Doesn't need support. Truth can stand on its own. Although it is suppressed, distorted, or cancelled, do whatever you want. Truth will always stand supreme. At midday, Adu lifted his eyes towards the way home. What he saw renewed his strength, but he pretended that he hadn't seen them. Birago, his mother, and Ya, his little sister, made their way slowly through the farm, conversing. Their presence attracted the attention of the exhausted farmers. Birago greeted them. The woman knew they were exhausted. She would have readily suggested that they break from their toil, but he dared not. A woman should not see that men are tired, and if she is so inquisitive as to see, she shouldn't mention it. Ya glanced at her big brother and made a face at him, but Ado pretended that he was not even aware that they were there. Didn't she know he was busy? As soon as she placed her load in the shed, Ya ran down to the swampy place and was soon lost among the tall maize, her little legs carrying her swiftly. She was going to look for crabs. She had her mother's caution to be careful not to hurt herself or break the crops. Yes, mother, she said, and off she went. Birago watched the three men among the rice digging away the weeds. She was proud of them, especially of her boy Ado. At 12, he already behaved like a grown-up. Ado had something on his mind that he always wanted to ask his father. He must ask him today. The day's work on the farm was over, and the three men were on their way home. Birago and her daughter had already left. Father, Ado said, why do people call our village Susa? Was Susa somebody's name, or was it the name of a tree, or what? The moment he asked that question, he became afraid of what answer his father might give him. He had he had heard the stories, but he hoped his father would tell him that those stories were not true and relieve his soul. sorrow about the village he liked so much. When Nemo heard the boy's question, he took a deep breath before answering. The story of Susa was a mystery. The landlord, Yabo, had inherited this large area of cocoa farm from his uncle many years ago. It was his uncle who built the village and gave it his own name, Yeboah. The landlord was only a boy at the time the property became his according to their inheritance custom. His mother and some elderly members of his family became custodians of the land until Yaboro grew up. By the time he was 30, he was in full charge of the farmland and the village. 17 years ago, he moved from Abenas, his hometown, and settled in the village to supervise the work being done on the farms. He did not simply leave the farms to the tenants, he was determined that the land should yield more money, and he found more tenants to join those who were there before he came. Nemo stopped for a while and then said, I came to this village after he had come to take charge, but he married before I did. Then Nemo laughed. Ado knew something had amused his father. I tell you, Nemo continued, Yeboah was a tough man. He's so different now from how he was then. Yeboah had married a beautiful young woman from Abenas, whom he adored. She was the one who tamed her boisterous husband. Until Yeboah married this woman, he was ruthless. If a tenant did not handle his farm well, Yeboah picked a bone of contention with him. The farmers' respect for Yeboah would have dwindled to nothing if his wife hadn't come to save the situation. She sobered the rich young landlord with her love. She was kind to the farmers. Whenever her husband was harsh with any farmer, she intervened, pointing out to him how indispensable these farmers were if this legacy were to benefit the family. She was a woman of grace, and Yoruba's deep love for her, changed him completely. Her name was Susa. Ado was listening with intense interest. He knew that Yeboah later changed the name of the village to Susa after his wife. The woman had conceived 4 years after the marriage, a conception that brought happiness to Yeboah because he feared that his wife might be sterile. When it was time for her to give birth, Yeboah took her to Abenes, their hometown. There was about the time Adu himself was born. His father told him. When Nemo reached this point, he paused for a long time until Adu asked him what the matter was. Nothing. Just listen to this, my son, and know for sure that we live in a strange world. Yeboah took his wife home, but the woman never came back to his village. Mahama was hearing the story for the first time. What happened to her? He asked. There was a road accident 2 months after she gave birth to a baby girl. According to the story, she was coming to the village to visit her husband when the accident occurred. Susa was one of the people who died on the spot. The strange part is that to this day, no one knows what happened to the child. The woman's body was found, but not her daughter's. Only a few people died. Some of the survivors had dispersed before many people arrived at the scene. Others were carried to the hospital for treatment and were discharged. The baby has never been found till this day. Immediately, Ado felt sorry for the landlord, though he did not understand the full impact of Yeboah's loss. Nemo continued. and told him that since the accident, the man had never been the same. He had withdrawn into himself and talked less. He changed the name of the village from Yeboah, his own name, to Susa, his wife's name. The strong, well the strong, well-built man grew thin. He was often absent-minded. Usually, men do not cry, but Yebora wept. The people of Susa realized that wealth was not the most important thing on earth. For Yeboah, his wife came first. When he lost her, he lost everything. It was not until recent that Yeboah had married again. Those who knew Yeboah said the loss of Susa had left an indelible mark on him. Not even the naming of the village after his first wife satisfied the yearning in his heart. His continued stay in village reminded him of Susa. He wanted to remember her always, but the more he did, the more miserable he became. Finally, he left the village and went to live in Abenas. As Nemo recounted this sad story, a terrifying thought occurred to him. Somehow, every 10 years in his own life, something terrible had happened. At the age of 15, he had slipped and fallen on on a hot coal plate. He still had the wounds on his thigh. Then his father had died when he was 25. 10 years later, right here at Susa, a catastrophic bushfire had swept through the land, destroying crops and other plants. And that was now exactly 10 years ago.